Donald is going to do great things as our new regional operations director. My name is George Vance. I am 48. Richard Caldwell just handed 5 years of my hard work to his 24-year-old son, who had been at Pinnacle Distribution for exactly 3 months. The conference room smelled like stale donuts and bad coffee, but everyone clapped anyway. I clapped too. You do what you have to do to keep a paycheck when you have a 17-year-old daughter looking at college tuition. Donald stood there, grinning like he had just climbed Everest, instead of walking into a job his daddy built for him. He had a fresh business diploma from UT, 0 field experience, and a haircut that cost more than my weekly groceries. Richard stood beside him, beaming with pride. Everyone in the room knew it was pure nepotism, but nobody said a word. Richard patted my shoulder. George has been absolutely vital in getting Donald up to speed, he announced to the room. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The meeting ended, and people queued up to shake Donald's hand. I moved slow, packing my laptop. My head felt incredibly clear, like the fog of the last 5 years had suddenly evaporated. Richard caught me by the door, loosening his silk tie. He was 55, carrying a heavy gut, and had a comb-over that did a poor job of hiding his bald spot. He had gotten his own start when his father-in-law retired, so this was just family tradition. I know this might seem sudden, George, Richard said, trying to sound sympathetic. But Donald brings a fresh perspective. We need young energy. You understand, right? It is just business, nothing personal. I looked him in the eye. I understand completely, Richard. He smiled, relieved. Great. You are incredibly valuable to us, George. Valuable. But not valuable enough for the promotion. Valuable enough to work 60-hour weeks and train his son to be my boss. I walked back to my desk through the quiet hum of the office. Pinnacle Distribution was a major industrial equipment distributor. I started here in March 2019, right after my divorce was finalized. I needed a fresh start and a stable job. It paid $65,000 a year back then. It was boring, exhausting, but it kept me busy. Richard hired me himself, promising that hard work would lead to advancement. I believed him. I spent the next 5 years proving my worth. I stayed late when shipments were delayed. I handled vendor emergencies in the middle of the night. I built relationships with clients from Houston to Phoenix. My performance reviews were flawless every single year. Richard always patted my back and told me to be patient, that my time would come. My daughter Chloe visited me every second weekend. She was 17, smart, and observed how tired I always looked. On Sunday mornings, she would find me at the kitchen table, surrounded by supplier invoices and logistics, spreadsheets. She would tell me to close the laptop, but I always told her I was building a future for us. When I told her about the upcoming director promotion, she was so proud. She told her friends her dad was going to run the regional operations. Now, I had to figure out how to tell her that a kid who still got his laundry done by his mother was taking my place. The first warning sign came 6 months ago. Richard casually mentioned his son Donald was graduating and wanted to get into the family business. I thought he would start at the entry level, learning the warehouse and shipping docks. Instead, Donald was given an office next to Richard, the title of Senior Operations Specialist, and a salary that probably exceeded mine. Richard introduced him around like royalty. Donald was supposed to observe and learn. In reality, he sat in my client meetings, playing on his phone while I explained complex logistics. He asked basic questions that showed he did not even know the difference between freight bill and a bill of lading. But I trained him anyway. I helped him because it was my job. And because Richard signed the paychecks. I found out the truth 3 weeks ago. I was working late on quarterly supply chain metrics. The office was quiet. I went to the break room to grab a fresh bottle of water when I heard voices from Richard's office. The door was slightly open, and the hallway amplified the sound. "The board is going to ask questions," a deep voice said. It was Howard Davis, the corporate director. "Donald has only been here a couple of months." "You told me George Vance was the guy for the job," Richard chuckled. "George is a great workhorse, Howard. Reliable, steady, but he is not executive material. He is 48. He is settled. He will keep doing the heavy lifting, and Donald will handle the client relations." "It works out perfectly, but what if George leaves?" Howard asked. Richard laughed again. "George won't leave. He has alimony payments, and his daughter is heading to college next year. He needs this job too much to make waves. He will fall in line. I stood in that dark hallway, holding my cold water bottle, listening to my boss use my personal struggles as leverage to exploit me. He had my entire life mapped out. I was the horse that would pull the cart while his son held the reins and took the credit. I walked back to my desk, packed my bag, and drove home in complete silence. My ex-wife had always called me too passive. She said I let people walk all over me. Maybe she was right. The next morning, I did not complain. I did not argue. I watched Donald closer. I noticed how Richard started including him in executive lunches while leaving me to handle the daily operational fires. I saw how other managers began spacing Donald on emails that used to go directly to me. By the time of the conference room announcement, the decision was already made. Watching everyone clap for Donald did not make me angry. It just gave me absolute clarity. Richard thought he had me trapped. He thought my financial obligations made me helpless. I opened a blank document on my computer and typed out my formal resignation. My hands did not shake. My mind was completely quiet. I was going to leave, but I was not going to leave quietly. I had spent 5 years building the Southwest distribution network. Richard and Donald thought they were inheriting a self-running machine. They were about to learn that the machine only ran because I was holding it together. I submitted my resignation letter at exactly 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Richard had just spent the afternoon walking Donald around the warehouse, introducing him to the crew as the new boss. I knocked on Richard's door and handed him the envelope. "This is my formal 2-week notice," I said. Richard looked up, confused. He opened the envelope and scanned the short letter. His face flushed and the smug grin he had worn all day vanished. "Is this some kind of joke, George?" he asked, sitting up straight. "No, it is not a joke. You are leaving because Donald got the promotion, aren't you? This is childish." I stayed silent. I had learned that in negotiations, the person who speaks first after a pause usually loses. Richard stood up, pacing behind his desk. He looked like a man who had just realized his safety net was gone. "George, let us be reasonable. You are upset, I get it. But throwing away 5 years of stability, especially now? It is not smart. Think about Chloe. She is starting college next year, right? Out-of-state tuition is not cheap. You have alimony, too. You cannot afford to walk away from a stable salary." There it was. The leverage he thought he had over me. The chains he believed would keep me pulling his cart forever. "I will manage," I said simply. Richard's face darkened. His tone shifted from fake concern to a cold threat. "You realize how this looks, right? Quitting because you did not get a promotion. It is unprofessional. If you walk out on us like this, do not expect a good reference from me. No company in this industry will hire someone who throws a tantrum when they do not get their way." I nodded. "That is your choice, Richard." He sat back down, trying a softer approach. "Look, George, I value you. You are the backbone of this branch. But Donald has a UT degree. The corporate board wants modern leadership. He represents the future." "And what do I represent?" I asked. "Experience," Richard said quickly. "Stability. That is why we need you here to support him. To do the work while he gets the credit," I thought. I stood up. "I will finish out my 2 weeks, Richard. I will make sure the client files are organized. Don't bother training Donald if that is your attitude," Richard snapped. "He is smart. He will figure it out." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Do you want to explain the Keystone and Jenkins accounts to him, or how the Tucson supply chain works?" Richard hesitated. He knew nothing about the daily operation, and Donald knew even less. He swallowed his pride, though his eyes remained angry. "Fine, 2 weeks. But don't expect any favors from me." I turned and walked out. Monday morning brought the first storm. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. and found Donald already at his desk. He looked like he had not slept all weekend. He had 3 monitors open, covered in logistics spreadsheets, and was staring at them with wide, panicked eyes. "Morning, Donald," I said. "Everything okay?" He looked up, and for a second, I saw pure terror in his eyes. "George, thank God. I have been here since 6 a.m. trying to figure out this email from Sarah Jenkins at Jenkins Logistics. She is threatening to cancel their entire contract by noon if we do not resolve a shipping delay." Jenkins Logistics was our largest client in the region, bringing in $2.3 million in annual revenue. I had managed their account personally for 4 years. They operated on a strict just-in-time inventory system. If our equipment components did not arrive on time, their assembly line shut down, costing them $50,000 an hour. "What is the issue?" I asked, walking over. "Something about delayed titanium brackets from a supplier in Tucson?" Donald stammered. "I don't even know which supplier she is talking about, and her emails are incredibly aggressive." I looked at his screen. Donald had opened the supplier database, but he was looking at a contract for copper fittings from a completely different vendor. He was drowning in data he did not understand. "Did your dad brief you on Jenkins?" I asked. Donald shook his head. "He said you had everything running on autopilot and I just needed to oversee the reports." I spent the next 3 hours sitting next to Donald. I did not mock him. I did not make him feel stupid. I just showed him the reality of the job. I walked him through the supplier network I had built, showing him how to contact the logistics manager in Tucson directly, instead of waiting for email replies. I explained how a 4-hour shipping delay in Arizona could shut down a factory in Texas. "This is incredibly complicated," Donald said, wiping sweat from his forehead after we finally resolved the issue and confirmed the brackets were on a truck. "How do you keep track of all this?" "Experience," I said, "and a lot of undocumented relationships." "Could you write down a step-by-step guide for all the major accounts?" Donald asked. "I will document the basic procedures," I said, "but relationships cannot be written down." That afternoon, I called Sarah Jenkins to confirm she was satisfied with the resolution. "George," Sarah said, her voice immediately relaxing, "thank goodness you stepped in. Some kid named Donald called me earlier and had no idea what a freight manifest was. I thought we had a breach of contract situation." "Is he new?" "He is the new regional operations director," I explained. Sarah was silent for a few seconds. "He is the director? And what are you doing?" "I am transitioning out, Sarah. My last day is next Friday." "You are leaving Pinnacle?" Sarah sounded shocked. "George, you are the only reason we renewed our contract last year. If you are not managing our logistics, we are going to have serious concerns." I kept my voice professional. "Donald is learning. He will have the full support of the team. I don't have time to train Pinnacle's new directors, George. We have production schedules to meet. If your company cannot provide competent service, we will look elsewhere." I heard similar concerns from 3 other major clients that afternoon: Keystone Manufacturing and Summit Industrial. They did not care about Donald's UT degree or Richard's family legacy. They cared about their supply chains, and they trusted me. By Monday evening, the writing was on the wall. Richard and Donald had stolen my promotion, but they had no idea that the job was not a prize. It was a heavy, complex machine, and without me to run it, the gears were already starting to grind. Tuesday morning, Richard called me into his office again. He looked tired. The usual arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a tense, defensive slouch. "George," he said, leaning over his mahogany desk, "I have been thinking about our conversation. Maybe we were both a bit hasty on Friday. I want to make this work. We are introducing a new role, Associate Director. You will handle the logistics systems and the technical operations, and Donald will focus on strategic planning and high-level corporate relations. You would be his second in command, an Associate Director." It was a fake title designed to keep me doing the exact same work for the exact same salary, all while letting his son play the boss. It was a transparent attempt to buy my labor without giving me the respect. "I appreciate the offer, Richard," I said, "but my decision stands. I am leaving next Friday." Richard's face hardened. His polite facade crumbled instantly. "You are making a huge mistake, George, I promise you that. In this industry, reputation is everything. If you walk out on us, I will make sure everyone knows you are a liability." "I am comfortable with my reputation," I replied. By Wednesday, I had 3 interviews scheduled with competitors. In industrial logistics, relationships are everything. I had spent 5 years building trust with clients like Jenkins Logistics, Keystone Manufacturing, and Summit Industrial. I had visited their warehouses, solved their shipping crises, and saved them millions. They trusted George Vance, not Pinnacle Distribution. My first interview was Thursday morning with Vanguard Solutions, a fast-growing competitor based in Houston. Their regional vice president, Edward Foster, met me in the lobby. He was 48, sharp, and wore a simple polo shirt instead of a luxury suit. He had been trying to recruit me for over 2 years, George, Edward said as we shook hands. I heard you might be looking for a new home. Word travels fast in the Southwest. It does, I said. Sitting down in his office, Edward did not waste time. I know what you did at Pinnacle. I know you built their entire Southwest logistics network. We want to do the same here. I am offering you the regional operations director position. He slid a paper across the desk. I looked at the numbers. The salary was $85,000. That was a 30% increase from the $65,000 I was making at Pinnacle. The medical benefits were fully covered, and they offered a performance bonus based on regional growth. We want your expertise, George, Edwards said. And we know the clients trust you. We are expanding, and we want Jenkins Logistics and Keystone to know they will be in good hands if they move their business to Vanguard. I had never signed a non-compete agreement with Pinnacle. Richard had never bothered to write one, assuming I would never leave. In our industry, it was standard practice for clients to follow account managers they trusted. It was not espionage, it was just business. I accept the offer, I said. I will start the Monday after my notice period ends. Edwards smiled and shook my hand. Excellent. Welcome to Vanguard. Friday afternoon, Richard called me into his office for the final time. Donald was sitting in the corner, staring at his shoes, looking completely defeated. A logistics spreadsheet was open on his laptop, but the screen was dimmed. I hear you had an interview with Vanguard yesterday, Richard said. His voice was trembling with rage. I did, I said, sitting down. You are still employed by Pinnacle, Richard hissed. That is a conflict of interest. It is corporate espionage. You are sharing proprietary details with our direct competitors. I have not shared any proprietary details, I said calmly. Those client lists are Pinnacle's property, Richard yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. You take Jenkins or Keystone with you, and I will sue you for every penny you have. I will make sure you lose your house, George. I will tie you up in court for years. Donald looked up, nervous. Dad, maybe we should talk to corporate legal first. Shut up, Donald, Richard snapped. He kept his eyes locked on me. You think you can just walk away and steal my business? I will ruin you. I stood up slowly. I had worked 60-hour weeks for this man. I had spent my weekends saving his contracts while he was on the golf course, and this was the return. Richard, I have given this company 5 years of perfect service. I have trained your son, even when you broke your promise to me. I have behaved professionally every step of the way. If you want to spend corporate money on a lawsuit with no legal basis, that is your choice. My lawyer will be happy to respond. I turned and walked out of his office. I did not run. I did not hide. I went back to my desk and continued organizing my transition files. I was going to leave on my terms, and no empty threats were going to stop me. I spent my final week at Pinnacle Distribution documenting every system, every contact, and every emergency protocol. I did not do it for Richard or Donald. I did it because the truck drivers, the warehouse staff, and the clients did not deserve to suffer because of a manager's greed. On my last Friday, I packed the remaining items from my desk into a single cardboard box. My daughter Chloe had sent me a text message earlier that morning, wishing me luck on my last day. She was excited about Vanguard, telling me that we could finally look at colleges in Colorado without worrying about the cost. I walked to Richard's office and placed my security badge on his desk. He did not look up from his computer. This is not over, George, he muttered. You are burning bridges you will need later. For me, it is, I said, and walked out of the building. The warm Texas air had never felt so clean. On Monday, I started my new role as Regional Operations Director at Vanguard Solutions in Houston. The atmosphere was completely different. The team was focused, professional, and valued experience. Within my first 3 days, Edward Foster had already introduced me to the executive board, who welcomed me warmly. My salary of $85,000 felt like a real reflection of my worth. But while I was settling in, a disaster was brewing at Pinnacle. It started on Wednesday. Donald was facing his first major test without my supervision. A critical shipment of heavy industrial generators for Jenkins Logistics, worth $1.8 million, was delayed at a supplier depot in El Paso. Sarah Jenkins was furious. She called Pinnacle, demanding immediate delivery. The backup transport fleet could only be released if the operations manager signed a certified logistics release form. Donald tried to log into the vendor portal to sign the form, but he did not have the executive security clearance yet. The vendor refused to accept his signature because he was not listed as the certified manager in their system. The system still had my name as the only authorized user. Donald actually called my cell phone twice on Wednesday morning, but I let it go to voicemail. I was no longer on their payroll, in a state of pure panic, knowing a multi-million-dollar contract was on the line and that his father's reputation was at stake. Donald made a fatal decision. He found an old paper manifest I had signed, scanned it, and digitally copied my signature onto the El Paso release document. He then uploaded it to the vendor portal, pretending I had authorized the release. Under Texas Penal Code Section 32.21, forging a signature on a commercial document to obtain property or services is a state jail felony. By copying my signature to bypass corporate clearance, Donald had committed forgery, but his stupidity did not stop there. Because he did not understand the routing codes, Donald entered the wrong depot code on the release form. The shipment was sent to a warehouse in New Mexico instead of Houston. The delivery was missed. The assembly lines at Jenkins Logistics shut down for 36 hours. The shutdown cost them exactly $1.8 million in lost production time and penalties. On Friday morning, Sarah Jenkins called me at Vanguard. Her voice was shaking with anger. "George, we are done with Pinnacle," she said. "They missed the generator shipment and their new director has been lying to us. They sent us an authorization form claiming you approved the routing on Wednesday. But I know you left Pinnacle last week." I sat up straight in my chair. "Sarah, send me that authorization form immediately." 5 minutes later, the PDF arrived in my inbox. There it was. My signature, clear as day, stamped on a document dated Wednesday, October 12, 2026. I had been working at Vanguard since Monday. I had not signed a single Pinnacle document since my departure. I immediately walked the document down to Edward Foster's office. He looked at it, then looked at my resignation receipt from Pinnacle. "This is commercial forgery," Edward said, his face turning serious. "They used your identity to cover up an operational failure that cost a client $1.8 million. We called Vanguard's corporate legal counsel. Within 2 hours, our attorneys drafted a formal letter to Pinnacle's parent board, attaching the forged document, my resignation letter, and my Vanguard employment contract. The letter cited Texas Penal Code Section 32.21 and stated that because Pinnacle had submitted a forged document, any contract clauses holding Jenkins Logistics to Pinnacle were void ab initio due to fraud. We also stated that if Pinnacle did not immediately cease using my name and credentials on vendor portals, we would file a formal criminal complaint with the district attorney." By Friday afternoon, the corporate director at Pinnacle, Howard Davis, had received the letter. The corporate office went into absolute chaos. A forged signature on a federal logistics portal was not just an operational error. It was a criminal act that threatened the entire company's federal shipping licenses. Howard Davis did not call Richard Caldwell. He flew directly from the corporate headquarters in Chicago to our regional office. He had the audit team pull every transaction Donald had touched in his 3 months at the company. What they found was a trail of ignored protocols, falsified shipping logs, and massive billing errors that Richard had covered up to make his son look successful. The trap Richard had built for me had snapped shut on his own family. The corporate audit at Pinnacle Distribution was swift and merciless. Howard Davis and the compliance team spent 4 days going through every operations record from the previous 6 months. They found that Richard Caldwell had systematically overridden standard safety checks to approve shipments that Donald had mismanaged. More importantly, our attorneys at Vanguard presented ironclad proof of the forged signature on the El Paso release document, faced with a potential criminal investigation for corporate fraud and state-level forgery under Texas Penal Code, Section 32.21. The parent board of Pinnacle acted immediately. Richard Caldwell was terminated for cause, losing his executive severance package and his stock options. The board cited breach of fiduciary duty and gross misconduct. Donald Caldwell resigned voluntarily the next day. Vanguard agreed not to file a formal criminal complaint with the district attorney in exchange for Pinnacle releasing any potential claims of client poaching against me. They also agreed to let Jenkins Logistics terminate their contract without the standard 60-day penalty. But the damage to Pinnacle was already done. Jenkins Logistics sued Pinnacle for breach of contract, seeking damages for the 36-hour assembly line shutdown. The lawsuit was settled out of court for a confidential sum, but industry reports estimated the payout at $1.5 million. Pinnacle's board of directors then filed a civil lawsuit against Richard personally to recover the losses caused by his gross negligence. He lost the lawsuit, his personal assets were seized, and 6 months later, Richard Caldwell filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. My life at Vanguard Solutions was a complete contrast. With Jenkins Logistics, Keystone Manufacturing, and Summit Industrial moving their accounts to Vanguard to stay under my management, our Southwest Division revenue grew by 45% in the first half of the year. My salary of $85,000 was supplemented by a performance bonus that allowed me to pay for Chloe's first year of college in Colorado without taking out a single loan. Chloe was thriving. She was studying environmental science and called me every Sunday evening. I was no longer the tired, stressed dad working at the kitchen table on weekends. I was present, relaxed, and secure. 1 year later, I was driving through San Antonio on business when I stopped for lunch at a small diner near the airport. The place was quiet, smelling of maple syrup and fried bacon. I was sliding into a booth when I noticed a young man sitting alone in the corner, staring intensely at a heavy textbook. It was Donald Caldwell. He looked different. The expensive, styled haircut was gone, replaced by a simple buzz cut. He was wearing a plain gray sweatshirt instead of his designer clothes. The textbook in front of him was on industrial supply chain logistics. I walked over. "Mind if I sit, Donald?" I asked. He looked up, startled. For a second, I thought he might get defensive. But then his shoulders dropped, and a tired, honest smile appeared on his face. "George," he said, gesturing to the bench. "Please, sit." I ordered a cup of black coffee. "What are you reading?" I asked. "OSU Master's Program Materials," Donald said, tapping the textbook. "Arizona State. I am starting their online logistics program next month. I figured I should actually learn the business from the ground up, instead of pretending I know everything because of a piece of paper from UT. That is a smart move, Donald. Logistics is not something you can fake." "I know," he said, looking down at his coffee. "George, I wanted to apologize for how everything happened. I was 24, arrogant, and believed my dad when he said I was ready to run the division. I was way out of my depth, and instead of asking for help, I panicked and did something stupid. You forged my name, Donald. That could have ruined my career." "I know, and I am deeply sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "You had every right to put me in jail, but you didn't. You let corporate settle it quietly. You even tried to help me when I was struggling on that first Monday. I didn't deserve that." I took a sip of my coffee. "You were in an impossible situation. Your dad wanted a legacy more than he wanted a functioning business. He used you as a pawn. My dad still blames you," Donald said, shaking his head. "He is bankrupt, living in a small apartment in Dallas, and still claims you sabotaged the company. But I see the truth now. You spent 5 years earning a promotion that should have been yours." I took it, and it nearly ruined my life. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Donald was no longer the spoiled kid in the conference room. He had been humbled by reality, and he was doing the hard work to rebuild his life the right way. I paid for both of our lunches and shook his hand before I left. He was going to be fine. He was young enough to learn from his mistakes. Richard, however, would spend the rest of his life bitter, blaming everyone else for the collapse of the house of cards he had built on nepotism. Sometimes, the best revenge is not an aggressive attack. It is simply walking away, letting the incompetent people face the natural consequences of their own actions, and building a better life for the people you love. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.